Hey guys, this is a new intro to the FightWrite podcast that I have added later. I've listened to the podcast and I realized I really didn't do a good job specifying which scene I'm talking about in particular. John Wick uses several different knives in the movies, and the scene that I am talking about is John Wick 2, the subway scene against Cassius. John Wick 3 is super knife heavy, but I'm going to refer to John Wick 1 and 2 in these podcasts because those are movies that you can rent and you can look to see what I'm talking about. So, again, I am talking about the knife scene and the knife that John Wick uses in John Wick 2, the subway scene against Cassius. Oh, and I do believe I gave the wrong dimensions of my hand. I believe from the center of my palm to the top of my middle finger is about 4.5 inches. All the way to the bottom of my palm is about 6, and the width is about 2 3/4. I forget exactly what measurements I gave, but I believe it made me sound like a borrower. And although I am a small human, granted garden gnome size, I ain't no borrower. All right, that's it. Enjoy the podcast, guys. Welcome to the FightWrite podcast, a writer's resource for writing action, violence, and fight scenes. I am your host, Carla Hoke. If you haven't heard, my book is out. FightWrite, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes with Writer's Digest, and it's available at bookstores everywhere and online. If you are near a big Barnes & Noble, hold on, let me switch my volume up. I feel like I'm too loud. Hang on, I don't want to blow your eardrums out. Okay, if you are near a big Barnes & Noble, it should be on a big special display and super easy to find July through September. I will be referring to the book in this podcast. It is super chock full of info. If you have bought it, please leave a review. By the way, if you don't have it, you'll still understand the podcast. Super promise. Speaking of my book, follow me on the Instagram at Carla, C-A-R-L-A .c.hoke, H-O-C-H, and comment on the types of blades pick that I've posted, and you'll be entered into a contest to win a signed copy of my book. Ah. If you comment that you listen to the podcast, your name will be thrown into the barrel 3 times. A-cha-ching. If you aren't a follower of my blog, FightWrite.net, give it a look. I am also at Twitter at Carla, C-A-R-L-A, Hoke, H-O-C-H, sort of. I forget I'm on Twitter. I'm sorry. If I am perfect, what is there for me to work toward? That's how I feel. I'm making a goal to tweet a couple times a week. I said originally every other day, but I'm not going to set myself up for failure. Also, I will be teaching at the Writer's Digest National Conference in New York City in August. At the end of the podcast, I'll give you a discount code. If I don't forget, I should make a note. If this is the first time you are listening to my podcast, I make notes all throughout. I never claim to be professional. Okay, first things first, y'all. How much of an artist's song can I play before I get sued? Because I have been swimming in the deep, warm pool of LL Cool J on Spotify. I love him. He's my generation. The LL stands for Ladies Love, and I be a lady, and I do love Cool J. And I just feel like the song Mama Said Knock You Out should start the show, but I don't want to be sued over it. I don't want it that bad. So somebody let me know on Twitter, and tell me if I can play, I don't know, 5 seconds and not be fined or go to jail. LL Cool James, and that is his name, James, give me the permission. Call me. Don't act like you don't have my number. I have Twittered it to you like a million times. If you write down my phone number, that's the number of times I have tweeted it to you, James. Give me permission. All right, here we go. In the last podcast, we looked at what writers can learn about fighting from the John Wick movies, and we mainly looked at hand-to-hand combat. Oh my gosh, I got to get water already. And I got a straw this time, so I don't sound like a hillbilly slurping out of a whiskey jug. If you have not seen the John Wick movies, it's okay. You'll be able to follow the podcast. If you are not comfortable watching violence, super stay away from the John Wick movies. They are crazy violent. Last time we looked at hand-to-hand combat, and today we will look at what writers can learn from John Wick's knife work, which is beautiful. I'm not going to spoil anything. And although John Wick 3 is more knife heavy, I mean very knife heavy, I'm going to reference John Wick 2 because you can rent that and see what I'm talking about, unless you own it. I own it. If it's possible to wear out a Blu ray, I will. All right, John Wick uses a double edged knife for close quarters combat. That is super smart. But to understand why it's smart, you got to know a little bit about knives. So today, I'm going to educate you a wee bit on knives so that you know why John Wick's choice is smart. We will go over a few things, other things if we have time. If not, next podcast. Okay, first, you need to know the parts of a knife. I know that sounds silly, but you do have to know this. The blade of a knife is the entire metal portion of the knife that can be sharpened. The sharpened portion of the blade is the knife's edge. Sometimes people confuse blade with edge. A single edge knife has one blade and one sharpened edge. A double edged knife has one blade but two sharpened edges. Okay, so when you talk about something like a dagger, you don't say a double bladed knife. A double bladed knife has a blade coming out both ends of the handle, which is a thing that I don't know how to wield. But in the case of John Wick and the case of daggers, as an example, a double edged blade has two sharpened edges on it. There are two types of double edged blade. I believe one is a spear point, and I think the other is a needle point. And the one used in the movie falls closer to needle point. Then it's a double. I'll explain. Okay, if a knife has a sharpened edge, that edge is known as a live edge. I say that because there's such a thing as a false edge on a knife, for one. It can have a little bit of sharpness to it, but it's not necessarily like a live edge. If you have a sparring knife, it can be a single edge sparring knife, but the edge is not live. When you are writing fight scenes with knives, anything with an edged weapon of any kind, do not use a live edge ever. Let me say that again. If you're trying to work out your fight scene, do not use a live edge blade. Pick up a ruler, pick up a wooden spoon. Do not pick up a live edge. I release myself from any injuries you may cause yourself with a live edge. All right, a double edged blade is not inherently better than a single edge blade and vice versa. By the way, there's another sort of blade that I categorize as a single edge-ish. Buy the book to see what I mean. But none of these knives are better than the other. All knives, all weapons look the way they do because they serve a purpose. I personally carry single edge knives. Most of them are folders. Folders are folding knives. The blade folds into the handle, and they are generally single edge knives. I say generally because as soon as I say they're always, somebody's going to show me one that's not. Because you have to be able to fold it back into the handle manually. So it has to have a spine on there. It has to have a dull spine. Now, in the case of a switchblade, I personally don't have a switchblade. I don't know if you can fold those up by also the spring activated button or not. But if you have to close that knife manually, it can only have one live edge on it. Okay. I also have a single edge that is a fixed blade, meaning the blade stays in place. Steak knives are fixed blades, fixed edge blades. Fixed blades have to be in a sheath because you have a live blade sitting there. Or if it's not in the sheath, it can be what is called an OTF knife, or out the front. An out the front knife, the blade is spring activated out the front of the handle. In John Wick 2, in the subway scene, John Wick, he uses an OTF, and I've looked it up, and I think it's a Microtech Combat Troodon. Microtech, feel free to send me that knife so that I can really talk about it on the air. Feel super free to do that, okay? LL Cool J, call me. The spring action in an OTF knife is only strong enough to expose the blade. You can't put the handle against somebody, hit the button, and the blade stab into somebody. By the way, a switchblade isn't an OTF knife because it reveals itself like a folder. But I'm telling you, some switchblades are so fast they look like an OTF knife. My husband has a switchblade that he showed me, and I was like, "Oh, you have an OTF?" He goes, "No, this is a switchblade," and it was that fast. So far, I've not found an OTF. I'm sorry, I've not found a switchblade that works for me because the buttons are so tough for me to press that once I get enough pressure on them to activate them, I kind of lose my grip on the handle, and the momentum of the blade coming out just about takes the knife out of my hand. Keep that in mind if your characters have little hands. Not that your writer will necessarily know how heavy that knife is. I'm just saying. By the way, knife manufacturers, easy for you to say, Cold Steel, Benchmade, Microtech, feel free to send me knives. Just feel the freedom of it. Um, I do have small hands. From the base of my palm to the top of my middle finger is like 4.5 inches, and pad to pad under my pointer to my pinky is about 2.5. I am basically a garden gnome. It's weird that I know the measurements of my hand. Is that weird? Does everybody know that? Switchblades and OTF knives are legal in most states now because thumb assisted blades are just about as fast to wield. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. A thumb assisted blade is one where, all right, you're holding the handle and the knife is buried into the handle, and on the edge of the knife there's a little button that comes out. I don't mean button that you press. I mean like a knob that sticks out, and your thumb uses it to open up the knife, and you can do that pretty darn fast with some practice. Because John Wick's knife is spring assisted out the front knife and not a fixed blade, he doesn't have to have it in a sheath. Again, a fixed blade has a live edge. You have to cover that up with something. But the fact that he has an out the front knife makes it possible for him to carry in his pocket, which he does, and that makes it can make it a little easier to conceal. It can, not necessarily, but in his case, he was just able to reach into his pocket. Okay, double-edged blades. They are great for piercing. By the way, if you want to know what single-edged blades and single-edge blades are really great at, buy my book. Yes, you can. Double-edged blades are superior to single-edge and single-edge blades for piercing. Yes, you can slash with them, and you can do that without having to turn your hand over. Okay, what does that mean? If you hold a steak knife, you can only slash in one direction because the other side of the blade is a dull spine. If you're holding a steak knife in the right hand, you can only slash moving left. To go right, you're going to have to turn your hand over, which is totally doable. That is how I trained with knives, was single edge, turning my hand over, which you can do quickly. But with a double edge, that hand turnover just isn't necessary. And in close quarters, small movements are better. And out and back is a smaller movement than back and forth. Also, stab wounds tend to be more lethal than incised wounds. What is an incised wound? Go to the index of my blog, FightWrite, FightWrite.net. Did I say that? I got to learn to spell. Let me write this. FightWrite.net. Look at the index, wounds by blades. There are pictures and they are graphic. You have been warned. Okay? They are not on dead bodies. The ones that are from autopsy reports, I have cut out the body, and so all you see is the actual shape of the wound. There's also descriptions and ramifications of knife wounds in my book. There's also an arterial map, which is super important, and we will talk about the arterial map more in the next podcast. Let me see how my time's going. I like to keep these under 15 minutes, so I don't know if we'll have time for that. Okay, John Wick could use a single edge for stabbing, especially a clip point. But the tip of a clip point tends to be more fragile. If you go to my Instagram at the picture of the different blade shapes, I put up, I think the very first one is a clip point, different than a drop point, clip point. A double edge is going to give you the most metal in your tip. It is a great A double-edged knife, such as a dagger, is a great secondary weapon for your medieval sword-wielding character because it can go through chainmail. True story. John Wick is just having to stab through clothing, sport jacket, button-up shirt, basic pants. But even if they are made of tactical material, you will hear John Wick speak of a suit that has tactical material in it. Okay, that is a Kevlar situation. That is for stopping bullets. A knife can pierce Kevlar. I'm saying that, and I wish I had looked it up for verification, but I'm pretty sure. If a knife can get through medieval chainmail, which it can, that's why knights often carry them as a secondary weapon. I'm pretty sure it can get through Kevlar. By the way, spiderweb is in Kevlar. Did you know that? And I think goat milk was at one point. Maybe not anymore. But look up the original Kevlar. It is amazing how that stuff was made. Okay, so the double edge is perfect for John Wick, and it could be perfect for your character if it's in close quarters, because stabbing is better than slashing, and a double edge is best for that purpose. And I'm hitting right about 15 minutes. I will go over some more John Wick knife stuff in my next podcast, specifically how he moves and the wounds he inflicts, which are way important for writers. When you write fight scenes, your wounds or the intended wound should drive the blocking of the scene. Okay, what do I mean by that? Not what I mean. Here's why. Fighters have an intended damage in mind. Okay, a boxer has certain strikes that they want to accomplish. You also have somebody just knocked on my office door. Whatevs. If you are a grappler, jiu-jitsu, you have certain moves you want to accomplish. Judo, certain throws you want to accomplish, and you work toward those moves because they are your strength, they are your specialty. Okay, in jiu-jitsu, I think right now my favorite go-to is probably a guillotine. And so I am going to move in the direction of a guillotine or a triangle if I'm on my back. And so I'm going to move in the direction that puts my partner in a position for me to triangle them or guillotine them. If I am in judo, I'm going to look for a way to do a seonagi. That is a certain type of throw that will go over my shoulder or hip, depending on how I vary it. If if I'm boxing, not boxing, Muay Thai. My boxing, I don't have a ton of experience just boxing. Muay Thai, my elbow is probably my right elbow is my nastiest shot. That is a very close quarter shot. I got to get really close. So I've really got to set my partner up for that. So when you're writing a fight scene, you got to think, okay, what do I want to accomplish here? Because your fighter is going to be moving differently if they shoot versus if they stab. Again, in the example of an elbow, my distance in throwing my right elbow is very different than me throwing a jab. A jab is going to be with my forward left hand. I don't have to have such close proximity. But to move in with my elbow, I've got to really get in close. I can't just randomly move in close. I've got to set it up so that's safe for me to do. So you have to tell yourself in this scene, okay, I want the intended damage to be. Okay, let's say that you don't know. I'm going to run over time. That's just how it is. Let's say that you don't know what your intended damage is. And I do mentoring appointments with writers and I ask them what their intended damage is. And a lot of times they don't know because they don't think in terms of intended damage. They just think, what do they want to accomplish for that scene? So ask yourself, what do you want to accomplish for that scene? Is it an injury that needs, how bad does that injury need to be? Do you need to dispatch the person? Do they need to be injured or do they just need to be hurt? And in my mind, there's a difference in injured and hurt. Hurt is causes you to have to change your stance. It gives you a little bit of pain. Injury means you're going to have to take care of whatever it is. Okay, so a black eye is hurt. Okay, a broken rib, that's an injury. Broken noses, they can swing back and forth depending on how bad the break is. But you say, okay, first of all, figure out how severe an injury you want. Figure out a way for that, a realistic way for that injury to happen. Let's say that you do want your character to have a black eye. Now remember, that black eye is going to be visible to other characters. So if they come across another character, it's likely another character may comment on that black eye. Speaking of injuries, I'm just going way off course here. I've got to make an outline. People respond more viscerally. There's more of a sensory response when you tell them how something happened versus something happened. If you go to my blog, FightWrite.net, and you look at my picture on there, I look like I have super cool Prince in the Revolution makeup on my left eye. I wish I could do makeup that good. That is actually a black eye. When it swelled up, it got a hematoma of blood. My coach mashed the hematoma out, and there's a reason for that in another podcast. And it moved the blood around my eye in such a way that it looked like I had on purple makeup, and it was fantastic. Okay, where was I going with that? That is a shame. See why I have to make notes on anything? Okay, oh, I know. When I tell people, oh, I got a black eye, that's fine. When I tell them I got kneed in the face, they tend to recoil a little bit more. We as humans want to know how something happened. Okay, I broke my leg. Oh, that's terrible. I got in a car accident and it was crushed between the door and a portion of the seat. Ugh, that's way worse. So be sure you really put more emphasis on how something happened than the fact that it happened. So get your intended injury in mind and then block the scene toward that intended injury. And that needs to be a whole podcast. So I need to shut my mouth right now because I'm at 20 minutes. Okay. Well, that's it for this episode of the Fight Right podcast. Do not forget about my book, FightWrite, FightWrite, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes. It is out with Writer's Digest. Have I said the full name of my book? I have a bad habit of not saying the full name of my book. Again, you can get it online. You can get it in just about any bookstore, no matter where you get it. You can leave a review on Amazon. Promise you do not have to buy a book on Amazon in order to put a review there. You can also leave a review on Goodreads. That would be super awesome for me. I will be teaching at the Writer's Digest Conference in New York. That discount code for registration is SPEAKER, SPEAKER 19. I will also be taking mentor appointments and signing at the Realm Makers Writers Conference. Look that up. It's a really neat conference for speculative fiction writers. Spec fic is sci-fi, fantasy, steampunk, alternate history, the cool stuff. All right, so Realm Makers, REALM, MAKERS. I think that's in a couple weeks, but you can still register and you can still get there, which I think you should. And that's the end of the podcast. Have an absolutely wonderful day. Next time, tune in and we'll go over a little bit more John Wick, and I will do a whole podcast on how to block fight scenes. I promise. Until the next episode, guys, get blood on your pages.